How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today we got to talk about Denzel Washington's recent comments about the prison system not being to blame for the problems in the black community. Now, of course, you know, on social media, he got all kinds of negative feedback, all kinds of backlash. The coon Uncle Tom sellout. You're not invited to the barbecue, all this stuff, the typical low IQ, basic copy and paste comments that they always make. But I digress. I don't even want to go down that road right now, but you get the point that I'm making. People were upset, but many people were in this corner, including myself. Now, I wasn't going to do a video about it. It kind of like got away from me, and it got a little bit, you know, past the time I like to do a video as far as within the window of it breaking. But I got to do this video here because I saw this video from Fox News in which it really kind of encapsulates this point, and it drives it home that much better. And the video I'm talking about, I'll play here in just a moment, is between Richard Fowler, who is more of a leftist black male, and David Webb, who is more of a true conservative black male. You're going to see the difference between someone who had a father, apparently, and someone who didn't. You'll see the difference between them, and you'll be able to see why having fathers in the household is important, why the stat of 80% two-parent households in the black community in 1960 versus current day 72 or 73% single parent households in the black community. You'll see why that difference, those statistics are important. What we're going to do right now is going to roll the video. You'll see Denzel make his comment first. After that, we'll get into the conversation between Webb and Fowler. So without further ado, let's go ahead and roll it.
Denzel Washington has a message to young criminals in jail. The system is not to blame.
If the father's not in the home, the boy will find the father in the streets.
That's right.
Yeah, I saw it in my generation and every generation before me and everyone since. It starts in the home.
I mean, very well said. I mean, he pretty much put it very plain. Now, for those very simple words, you get all kind of criticism on social media. And I think it's unfair. It's really unfair because what he said, you're going to see play out in a way in the conversation coming up next. So let's go ahead and get to that.
Really? Let's debate that. Here to weigh in and build on this is Fox News contributors David Webb and Richard Fowler. Richard, to you, is Denzel right?
Now, you could tell who's who. When I said you had one guy who had a father and one guy who didn't, you could tell who was who right now. And I'm not trying to be funny or make jokes, but I mean, you can tell. That right there lets you know that having a father in the household is very important. But let's continue.
Well, I think you can't really judge off one soundbite there, right? I think it's a larger, more systematic problem. I grew up without a father in the home, but what I benefited from was I had a mother who had a profession, so I never worried about food insecurity. I never worried about the lights going off. I grew up in a good neighborhood that had a high-quality public school.
That's really totally unimportant. The point is, a father in a house. Look, you can have somebody that comes from a rich family with just one parent, but there's certain things that your father will give to you just from you observing him in the household, interacting with your mother, that are priceless. The money cannot make up for the lack of a father. That's fine that you had all these creature comforts. You lived in upper class, middle class, whatever neighborhood. Hey, that's good on you. I'm not trying to downplay your mother's efforts, but nothing she could do couldn't make up for the lack of a father. And it's evident in the way that you're speaking and the way that you appear. I'm not trying to be funny, but it is what it is. Now, me personally, I grew up in a single parent household, but I also always had my father. Always. You know, my father was very active and is still very active. Even at 33 years old, both of my parents are very active. You have to have that. And if you don't have it, you're going to have problems in the future.
And so I benefited from all of those things, which made not having a father in the home not as big of an issue. Now, if you took me and you put me in a place where I didn't have those things, then yeah, then I think that it would have been probably, my existence would have been problematic. And that is what I think Denzel's missing in his quote there.
David, to go on to his quote, just to finish his statement, he says, unfortunate, it says, so now we know we can't blame the system. It's unfortunate that we make it easy to work for them.
Yeah, and the fact is that Richard is actually right about this when it comes to the issues of the blended families or different families. The father's needed in a lot of ways, and while there are exceptions to the rule, and there are people that are raised by single parents successfully, look at the broader scope of what's happened in the black community.
before he goes down that road, what he said was correct. There's always exceptions. You can have somebody that comes from a single parent household and they do well, they're well adjusted, but there's always variables. Like I said, I come from a single parent household, but my situation was not like the average single parent household. I had both of my parents were very active. A lot of people that come from single parent households, sometimes they don't even have one parent. They may just have their grandmother, right? The mother's not there. The father's in the penitentiary or dead or just a deadbeat and is never around. That was not my life. And those variables make a difference. So it's difficult to say that everybody that comes from a single parent household is going to have significant issues. However, as a general statement, it's true that having two parents in the house is always better than not.
The father being out of the home and you don't have a father to raise a boy, to become a man, to raise another boy, breaks the parent cycle dynamic. And you can be born into disparity economically from an education point of view. I know for people that have gone through this. I went to high school with people that had been through that cycle, but the parents made a difference. So we have to bring the father back. We can't have a system that takes him out of it. And we need to overcome that with really fixing the problems that exist in these communities. But without the father, without that parent dynamic, we're going to see this grow. And it's not just in the black community, it's in the American community that we're seeing this lack of raising boys to become responsible men, to understand what it means to actually be a man.
Preach on, preacher.
I got to bring you to this. I just want to build on this conversation.
See, look, Richard Fowler just wanted to interrupt because he's personally offended. He's offended. See, and that right there lets you know that, the father, not having a father really affected him because he's not able to control his emotions. He's emotionally driven rather than being thought driven. A lot of things I see, especially in some of the comments in my videos that talk about these issues, people really want to, they want to just, it's insecurity speaking in the comments, right? It's not a whole lot of logic and reasoning. Men mostly think in if-then statements. If I can do this, then I can do this. If this happened, then this happened. Just logic, in a mathematical way. Women tend to think in emotional terms. But it works well for them because they're very good at being emotional and understanding how to deal with their emotions in a feminine way. Men are not very equipped to do that. So when we get into emotionally driven thinking, it's going to just manifest itself in very negative ways. When you hyper emotional in a very masculine way, those are the guys that keep going to jail all the time, right? Because they have no brain power, no ability to control themselves, no ability to think just beyond impulse reactions. Okay. Richard Fowler is exhibiting some of that behavior just in a less masculine way. I'm not calling him gay. I don't know what sexuality is. That's unimportant. I'm just talking about the effects of not having a father are very evident in your behavior.
Because you guys kind of agree. But a legal scholar named Michelle Alexander said this: the new Jim Crow, mass incarceration, the age of colorblindness. The politicians and the American criminal justice system use the war on drugs to oppress minorities and marginalized communities. Do you see merit in that, Richard?
Well, I think there's absolute merit in that. And I think there's Republicans and Democrats that agree. There's a bill that was introduced a couple weeks ago by Kamala Harris and Rand Paul.
Kamala Harris and Rand Paul, what are they doing working together? I mean, I don't understand that. I need to do some research. Citation needed on that one, boss, because Kamala Harris and Rand Paul, you couldn't get no more opposite, but maybe they're the same. I think Rand Paul is not necessarily a conservative. He's more of a libertarian. I think he does say that. Same thing with his father, but I'm not really sure why he'd be collaborating with Kamala Harris. But we'll see what's going on with that.
To tackle that issue, because criminal justice reform is an issue. And where David is right is that, yes, while when you have crack cocaine on your streets, I don't care if you have a two-family household or not, you're going to be impacted by seeing a crack dealer on your street, period. I was lucky and privileged not to have a crack dealer on my corner, and I had a single mother who worked and gave me opportunity. But with that being said, there's a lot of families, both black, white, and Hispanic, that grow up in poor neighborhoods without a strong family structure that also have to deal with the systemic problems that we have from the lack of investment in community, from the lack of high-quality public schools, and from the lack of the fact that we're not dealing with the failed war on drugs.
And the war on drugs is needed. I'm sorry. People might get triggered at that. A lot of conservatives think that the war on drugs should be ended, libertarians and liberals, but no. I grew up, people don't understand. I grew up in the crack era. You know what I'm saying? I had an uncle die of HIV from heroin usage when I was 5 years old. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember the funeral. Like, I see the real effects of drugs. Okay, the war on drugs. Like, people that sell drugs, I know probably 20 black males in jail. At least 10 of them or more are in jail on drugs. And nobody says it's the white man's fault. It's the war on drugs, and it's the, it's the justice system is corrupt. These guys knew what they were doing. They wanted to get that easy money, that fast money, and they lost. They did not make excuses as to why they lost. They just took it as an L. Now they're doing their time. It's very simple. The bigger issue here is the school system and trying to teach kids skills they're going to have to need when they get older, rather than trying to, have these corrupt systems like they have in Washington, D.C. I did a video about that, about Ballou High School. Rather than these corrupt systems, put in some vocational schools to teach kids real skills so they don't have to go out there and think they got to be a dope boy to make money because they don't have any other skills and they don't know what else to do. They're just out there and want easy money. They don't want to go work at Walmart or something like that. They rather get more money than they'll be able to get from that. So they go sell dope. But they know what they're doing. So it ain't like I'm making excuses, and nobody should make excuses. So the whole thing about war on drugs being a failure, I think is just the wrong way to look at it. Drugs decimate communities. They kill nations. You don't want drugs in your place. You go to other countries. If you get caught with drugs, you might end up getting killed. So I digress. Let's get back into the video.
I'd love to say that I agree with you on that one, Richard, but I really don't in this respect. It's what you do, your behavior. When you start, regardless of the reason you begin to use a drug,
that's right,
or do whatever that leads you to incarceration, commit a crime, you've got to go back to that foundation. We're dealing with the after effects, which I agree on the criminal justice reform issue is worth taking a look. But we have got to get down to the core of this. We've got to go back to the very foundation of why people commit that first crime. LeVar Ball, let's use him as an example. He excuses his son stealing, shoplifting, saying, well, I'm from L.A. It's no big deal. You see this. I asked the question, Brian, you heard me ask this before. Should we then shoplift big baller sneakers? The problem is that message is being sent to the community by irresponsible and frankly unqualified fathers that it's okay to shoplift a little. That's the beginning of the problem.
There it is right there. I agree with what he said 100% because, I like, first of all, before I even say what I'm going to say, I like LeVar Ball. I like what he's trying to do, but that's a problem in the black community when you say, oh, it's okay to shoplift a little bit. It's not really a big deal. You can go just take something that's small. See, that gives them, these kids, that gives them the mentality that they can go to China and just take some sunglasses because it ain't no big deal. They ain't going to miss it. Piece of plastic. So what? And then what happens when they get locked up? Then they want to say, please come get me. Please save me. It's an injustice, all this, that, and the third. When in reality, if they would have respect for the place that they're at, if they would have had respect for property, then they would not be in that position. But what teaches a child about respect for property, about respect for a place? It starts at an early age with very small things. Nip it in the bud before it becomes a problem. Because if you don't, then they grow up, they're 18 years old, and all of a sudden they're a habitual offender. It starts from a small seed and then it blossoms.
Let me make one point on this real quick. And I'm from a single family household, and let me say this very clear, is that just because there's a mother in the house or just because there's a father in the house does not mean that family's broken. My family was not broken because my father wasn't there. As long as there's love in the home works.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Now, Fowler, come on, man. You're just really just airing out your insecurity to everybody. Everybody sees it. Just like I know, that you did not get everything you needed from your mother in the house. Just because she had money and you were able to go to a good school and live in a good neighborhood, you know that you're missing some things internally as a man that you need to go throughout life. Okay? You know that you're missing some of the killer instinct, the decisiveness, the aggressiveness, things that you can only learn from your father, how to interact with women. Like I said, I'm not questioning him in his personal life, but I'm just saying I know because I had to experience some of that myself. Although I was able to not totally miss out because I always had my father and I always had male figures around. And a lot of you guys in the comments who are regular viewers, you joke about me talking about I have an infinite amount of uncles. I do. I have a lot of uncles. friends of the family, true uncles, great uncles, cousins as like my uncles, like my father's first cousins. So they're like his brothers. So I have a lot of people that are like my father's age that I can talk to, that call me, that give me advice. I have a lot of mentors in my life. Okay. And I also have a good mother who does not interfere with my ability to speak to these men as men and get that advice I need. See, when you're living in a single parent household, a lot of times you don't have those things that you need. And I think that that, Richard Fowler. So your insecurities are being worn on your sleeve. And I think those of us who understand what a man who comes from a single parent household looks like, we are able to identify that. So I don't mean to rag on Richard Fowler, but I think that this conversation was necessary to highlight, to show why having fathers in the black household, in every household, it doesn't matter what color you are very important. So what do you think? Do you think that Denzel Washington was right on point with his statements about the system not being to blame? It's about the household. It's about having a functioning two-parent household. Is that the biggest thing that we need in our communities to help get them back on track? Do you think that David Webb was correct in what he was talking about, especially that last point about LeVar Ball saying it's okay to shoplift a little bit, it's not really a big deal? How about Fowler? Do you think that what he was saying was correct? As long as you have love in the house and you got money, you don't necessarily need two parents. Maybe it'd be good, but if you got one parent and there's love in the house and you got some money, then it's all good. Whatever your comments are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.